the opposite of addiction is connectivity. And I subscribe to that, meaning that when I'm alone, isolated, in my addiction, in my alcoholism, it's hard for me to imagine a world where there's other people who are actually either recovering from or have recovered from that same exact hopeless state of body and mind. And so a lot of these folks, like when you're on the receiving end of one of those phone calls, it's the first time that they start talking about their drinking or drugging in detail. And they can be on the receiving end, like, they can hear that somebody identifies with that. I mean, how incredible is that?
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Finding New Waters. My name is B. Reeves. I'm the Director of Business Development here at New Waters, sitting here with our CEO, Justin McClendon, and our very special guest today is Luke DeGrossi, who is the CEO of Novara Recovery Center in Fairfax, Virginia. Welcome, Luke.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you for being here. This has been in the works for quite a while now, and we've met. How did we meet? Remind me.
So we stopped by New Waters on the way up to Fairfax, my business partner, Rylan Grosh, and I. I think somebody connected with Rylan on your team, and we hadn't even moved into our space. We hadn't been licensed yet. We were still sort of traveling from Charlotte up to Fairfax at the time, and New Waters is kind of smack in the middle. So on one of those trips, we stopped by New Waters and toured the space, met you guys in person. I know I stopped by for a breakfast that you guys did with a speaker. And that was, gosh, I mean, we've been open for 6 months now. So I think that was probably the end of 2024.
Yeah. I remember that was some real commitment, because that thing started at 9 a.m. and you drove straight down from DC or from Fairfax for that.
Yeah, well, I learned that anybody who's been in the DMV knows that there's a ton of traffic in this area. And I would argue that it's probably some of the worst traffic in the country. But I learned on that breakfast that if you leave at 4 a.m., there's no traffic. You can get to North Carolina. It's a straight shot.
Believe me, I do that drive several times a month. And I've learned that if I leave before 7, there's no traffic.
That's great.
Yeah, I would completely second that it is maybe the worst traffic in the country. But let's not threaten our serenity further by talking about DC traffic. But anyway, we appreciate meeting you, and I could tell y'all are like-minded people when y'all came by that first time. And then I've been to see Novara myself and it's a beautiful facility, and they're doing really good work there. So, how did you, first of all, I mean, I certainly didn't imagine myself working in this field, mainly because I didn't know it existed. How did you end up working in the field and starting Novara?
It's a great question. And I would have probably told you the same thing, that I did not envision myself working in this field. I guess for me, it started like 8 years ago. So I do a daily practice where I love journaling and writing and checking in with myself on a daily basis. And 8 years ago, I posed a question which was posed to me by a mentor. And it was something along the lines of like, what would you do if you had all the money in the world? And the question is simply supposed to get your mind going, because a lot of people, when you ask them, what do you want to do? A lot of the financial constraints that the ego and the brain might start to create will affect how you answer that question. And so when you remove all of the financial component and you go through the exercise of what would I do if I had all the money in the world, the answer for me at the time, 8 years ago, was that I would start a drug and alcohol treatment center. And that seed kind of planted itself in that exercise that I did. But it wouldn't be until about a year ago when I would actually take action on it. So Rylan, who is a co-founder and the CFO at Novara, and Rob Marino, who's also a co-founder and the CMO at Novara, are two of my closest friends. Robert actually started a treatment center up in Chester, New Jersey. And a lot of the inspiration for Novara came from Rob and all of the great work that he was doing in New Jersey. So effectively, the three of us came together about a year and a half ago and started having these conversations. We came to Fairfax as a destination for this treatment center because Rylan grew up in Fairfax. And so a lot of the kind of childhood things that he experienced, which then played into his journey, took place in Fairfax, as do many of our stories. They start wherever we were born and raised. And so we felt strongly about bringing this center to Fairfax. And yeah, we got licensed at the end of 2024, accepted our first client at the end of January, and have been just kind of growing ever since.
Cool.
That's great.
But I guess I'm also asking, how did you find yourself in this field altogether too?
Oh, well, that's a much, that's a much better question. Well, so 10 and a half years ago, and this was not my first attempt at getting sober. So I got sober at the age of 24, and that journey started at the age of 22 in terms of attempts at getting sober. But my first arrest was at the age of 15, and my entire high school years, adolescent years were spent drinking, drugging, getting arrested, in and out of psych wards, rehabs, things of that nature. And yeah, at the age of 24, found myself actually ready to stop drinking and drugging, which is kind of what that was the bigger answer to your question, I think, which is that 10 and a half years ago, the journey was kind of set into motion in my own recovery.
Yeah, cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want to know about how you started Novara, but it's always interesting because, like I was saying a second ago, I always think about the image of being in fifth grade, and they say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I can't imagine that anybody gets up there and says, "I want to be, work for or be part of a treatment center for drugs and alcohol."
Yeah.
But it takes what it takes, and I don't really think there's anything else I'm supposed to be doing with myself. So I'm glad I found my way.
Yeah. Luke, question for you. You mentioned, the question kind of posed by your mentor, if you had all the money in the world, why a treatment center? I mean, I think there's an obvious connection there between your own personal sobriety and maybe a calling, but maybe to let you answer that instead of me speculate. What's the connection? Why a treatment center?
So sobriety's been like the most pivotal thing in my entire life. And even just not even just the removal of the drink and the drug, but then pursuing a lot of the emotional sobriety that we talk about in long-term recovery, and learning how to deal with defects, learning how to deal with fear. Like the psych ward that I was admitted into, I admitted myself into a junior year in high school, and I was homeschooled for about 6 months that junior year in high school. The fear and shame that I felt as a result of that experience, it shaped everything. Like every single belief system that I carried until I got sober was somehow touched by that experience. And so the reason why I think a treatment center came to mind when I answered that question was because it was less about putting down the drink and the drug for me. It was more about reshaping my entire perspective on life, on myself, on others. And all of that started for me at a treatment center. So it wasn't that the treatment center, magically got me sober, but the treatment center planted all of the necessary seeds. I was at a group meeting yesterday, and we were discussing step one in one of the books that we were reading. And step one in I guess I can talk about things like this kind of openly on here, but step one in the 12 and 12, discusses how you should go do some controlled drinking if you don't think that you're a real alcoholic. And it basically talks about the fact that a gut full of booze and a head full of AA do not mix. That was like my experience. So when I went to that first treatment center, out in a faraway town in Pennsylvania that ends in Ville, and came back to my day to day and tried going back to drinking and drugging, it was no longer fun. Like whatever, whatever I had experienced up until that point had changed by going to that treatment center. So the treatment center didn't get me sober. I just said I went back out for another 2.5, 3 years, I think, following that experience. But in those 2.5, 3 years, I was doing, unbeknownst to me, exactly what the book said, which was like, go try doing some controlled drinking. Go try seeing how that works for you. And it didn't work. The solution that had worked for me for so many years no longer worked. And I believe that it was all due to the fact that I had been at that treatment center and they had brainwashed me for 30 days. And when I left, I it had completely shifted. Like now the rhetoric in my head was no longer this like, unaware, blind, like drinking, drugging. There was this chatter in the back of my head that was like, oh, they said that would happen. They said that you would do this. They said that you would go lie to this person or steal from that person or whatever. So as it was playing out in real time, I now had this like consciousness about the whole thing, and I had this awareness. And so the drinking and drugging, I mean, it was no longer fun. So that, I hope that answers your question. That's why a treatment center, because a treatment center is a place where, for me personally, like so many of those seeds were planted, and I was able to be safely removed from the substance for the first time in my life for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That, I appreciate everything you just said. The thing that stuck out to me the most, I think, is when you said that you were in that psych ward, you checked yourself in, but just the amount of shame and guilt you felt. You said fear and shame. And it reminds me of, it's so interesting in recovery and in treatment when people are almost always embarrassed and fearful. They're ashamed that they're going to get help. Mm-hmm. I remember I was in a meeting one time and this guy was talking about this, and he said, when I first got in here, I was so embarrassed. And I had my own memory of, I remember holding hands, saying the Lord's Prayer in a church on a street in Raleigh where it's pretty visible from the road. Remember, it was in the middle of the afternoon, thinking, what if somebody sees me in here? Mm-hmm. How embarrassing. And then years later, I heard this guy talking about this in a meeting, and it's kind of what you're talking about. It's, this fear that, in my case, I only speak for me, of people are going to find out, and the embarrassment of going to treatment and being in, 12-step recovery. And, that is so interesting that seems embarrassing. But the way this guy framed it, he said, what was embarrassing was being passed out in the bushes, being on the hood of a car in handcuffs with a bloody nose, and, my wallet lost and one shoe on, and not being able to pay my bills and overdrawing my account and arrest. That's what's embarrassing. But yet we're so twisted when we get sober. We're more embarrassed about getting better, which is noble, than the way we were living before.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, like we all operate from the first person, right? Like we're so self-absorbed. We all think from the I, world revolves around me. And when we flip that, right? Like, so let's say somebody came to you and said, hey, I'm struggling with drinking alcohol right now, and my life's becoming unmanageable as a result of that. And I have all these consequences, and I can't stop drinking. And all I want to do is just be a better husband to my wife, a better father to my kids. I want to be a better employee. And in order to do that, I'm going to stop drinking, because every time I drink, I just seem to, make really bad decisions. What would you say to that person? You would probably meet that person with compassion, with empathy, with support. You would cheer for them and be like, wow, that's such a great piece of self-awareness that you've arrived at, and I want to support you in this journey. But whenever we are thinking about it for ourselves, it becomes this ominous, like shameful decision. Yeah. Everybody's going to hate me.
It's so true.
Yeah, it's so true. And I know, Luke, I'm sure you see this on a daily basis, and we do as well. But I mean, it's always such a central piece of the the treatment or the recovery process, not only for that client, right? That's like, thinking about job or, other individuals and what are they going to think, or how am I going to live my life? How am I going to hang out with my friends? All that stuff that we see, but the family members too, right? I mean, we see that on a regular basis that, not to say that the family doesn't love and care about their loved one, but there tends to be a lot of times some of that, like, well, we can't let other people know, about this kind of dark secret, or, what if, the world at large finds out about, our son or our daughter or my spouse or whatever it is. It's tough, man. And I know people talk about this all the time, but I couldn't help but to think about it when we're having this conversation is, if it was a heart condition, or right, like people just don't see it as a disease, right? Because if it was any other medical condition with its own set of symptoms, like we just don't treat stuff that way, right? We're very compassionate, care is embraced, and we want people to do anything it takes to get better and live a happy life. But addiction's just not seen that way, unfortunately.
Yeah. We've made strides, though, I think, too. Like a lot of the stigma, when you compare it to what it looks like even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I mean, just statistically, right? Like you've got 15% of the population that has a SUD. That's like, I don't know, 50 million Americans. And that's just like
Yeah.
what's reported, right? So you gotta wonder who's not reporting. So even just like statistically, I mean, if you go tell somebody, hey, I don't drink and I have a drinking problem and I don't drink, I mean, it's likely, at least I've had many experiences like this, where I'll share that with somebody if I find that, the situation's right for that. More often than not, that person either knows somebody, has been through something, has a distant family member who like, went through something similar. So I think the conversation has definitely gotten more open, and I hope that it continues to get more open.
Absolutely. The funny thing is, I'm in recovery. People I'm talking to are in recovery. I see celebrities who are in recovery on the internet and public about it and open about it. I work at a treatment center. My girlfriend's in recovery. I'm surrounded by people in recovery who are, quote unquote, successful, normal people. But yet the first thought when I hear the word alcoholic is like that brown bag, and that addict is like a guy with a coat in the alley. I just still, no matter what. And the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, a surgeon and a stockbroker, but yet still, at least for me, that's still that first thought is of that kind of stereotype, and yes, the stigma is very much has been chipped away at, but it's definitely still there. And when the rubber meets the road, when somebody really needs help in the family, then they can kind of clam up even more.
Yeah.
I lived in Manhattan for about 5 years, and I used to attend a meeting in New York City that was my home group, and I had a fantastic experience there that kind of speaks to this. We say the Serenity Prayer at the end of the meeting. We're all circled up, and gentleman to my right had probably fit the mold of what you were describing, right? Like what society or what Hollywood depicts the alcoholic to look like. Gentleman off the streets, probably homeless. To my left was a gentleman who had picked up an Oscar about a week prior for a movie that he starred in. And so like that for me was such a pinnacle moment in AA, because it's just like, this is it. Like, this is it. Like, it does not discriminate. Like, we're both here for the same thing. It's a very beautiful moment that I look back on.
That's really, I mean, there's not a better description I've ever heard of the steerage to captain's table is exactly what you're talking about. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Novara, I've been there. It's beautiful. Y'all are good guys doing good work. What's it been like in terms of what's been something that kind of you didn't expect? What's been easier than you expected? What's it been like to open a treatment center?
It's a great question. My background is in commercial real estate, specifically affordable housing. That was, my first foray into the professional world, and built a fantastic company. And I think probably a miss on my part was like, real estate was very much like kind of 1+1 is 2. You acquire an asset, you hope to improve it, and if the one that you're inputting, makes sense, then you kind of do the deal, you acquire the property, put in the time required to improve it. Very 1+1 is 2. Whereas, a treatment center has so many different moving parts. So not even from like a staffing perspective, although that's certainly a big one where, day one, you need to have like 15 people hired, ready to go, waiting for that first client to come in the door. But then the second piece that really adds a lot of unknown is that, you're dealing with clients on the worst day of their lives. And
Yeah.
for whatever reason, when they reach out, they're blessed with this like really small window that I can't create, you can't create. There's no treatment center or program in the world that can create it. It's just this like divinely manufactured point in time where that individual decided to reach out for help. And so that has really opened my eyes a lot to the importance of being responsive when individuals do reach out. And I think that my prior career in commercial real estate really helped me with that. The importance of communication, of attentiveness, of responsiveness. One thing we do really well is that anytime a call comes in, we have a 24/7 admissions line. We're a small, like newer program. So you better believe that Ryle and myself and Rob are manning those telephones after hours. And then we've got admission reps that are, manning the phones throughout the day. But just the attention to being responsive, I have found, is extremely important. But one of the biggest challenges has really been around licensure. We didn't know, that we wouldn't be able to open up two programs at once, PHP and IOP, which is what we currently offer. And so we learned that by submitting application for both licenses, only to learn that we would only be licensed for one program, not two. And so that was a big frustration because we got licensed at PHP and we found ourselves where clients were leaving, after 30 days of completing their program, and they would come to us and their clinical team and their case management team and be like, okay, so, I can do IOP here, right? And we'd have to tell them like, no, you can't, we're not licensed. And so we would have to refer out. And, for a client who just spent 30 days, like free from a substance, getting acclimated, learning about vulnerability, opening up to the clinical team, forming friendships and relationships with other clients, being told like, hey, sorry, buddy, you now have to go to a totally different program and go through all of that acclimation again. That was really tough. So, I'm very grateful to share that we did get finally licensed for IOP about 2 weeks ago. And so now we can step clients down and they can continue their care at Novara.
I won't maybe bog this down. I have so many questions because I kind of nerd out on the whole licensure and accreditation stuff. So I'm so curious, like why they wouldn't let you guys do two programs. I mean, it seems silly and backwards to me, especially when we're trying to remove barriers to treatment.
I will say, DBHDS in the state of Virginia has been great to work with. Comparatively, like one of my partners does own a center up in New Jersey, and he's reported that getting licensed for any level of care in the state of New Jersey is a far more tedious process than it is in Virginia. And so for that, like, shout out to DBHDS, but I don't understand. I have the same exact question you do, and I don't know the answer. I think that if I'm DBHDS, I think the response might be that prior to giving additional licenses, they just want to make sure that you're able to kind of handle the first one. But yeah, it was a very difficult first 6 months for us having to discharge clients to new programs. Thankfully, there's some good partners in the area.
Yeah, you made an interesting point too, and something that I think about, talk about a lot, about that. We never know when somebody's going to have that window of opportunity. And the way I see it, we all have a finite number of these windows. And as far as I'm concerned, I had one, and I think hope I'm one of those people who did all his relapsing before he got sober. But that's so true. And that's why, you mentioned that your previous job has sort of gotten you prepared for the urgency that comes with the territory. And And I mean, that's exactly right. That's why, and this weekend I was with my girlfriend. We were in West Virginia, and and Sunday afternoon, it just seems like that's when everybody decides they need to go to treatment. Sunday, while I'm driving in the mountains with no service, that's when everybody needs to go to treatment. And, and I joke about it, and I definitely complain about it. But I mean, I also know that that's just how it is. It's just how it is. It's not a 9 to 5 job. It's just not, and people are ready when they're ready. And if we're not able to take that call and facilitate it, then we might miss that window, and that person may never get help, or worse, something bad happens.
Yeah, I really stress this to our admissions team that, it's life or death. Like it's not about, I mean, it is about growing census, because obviously you want to continue doing what you're doing. But when a call comes in, it's literally life or death, meaning that for whatever reason, that person had that desperation to reach out and ask for help. And so when that happens, like, it is all hands on deck, and we need to get that person into treatment, because the moment that we answer that phone and hang up, that window, it starts closing. It just starts closing. That's the nature of it.
Absolutely. And then the part two of that point for me, when I'm like, I had this call, I was manning our admissions phone overnight last night. And I was on a call on the way into the office this morning, talking to a young woman who lives down in the Wilmington area, and she called needing help, and so we had a nice conversation, and asked her kind of when she was thinking about coming in. And she said she's got a really important meeting on Thursday. And, this is for, one step below the emergency room detox, where it's, even maybe more urgent than residential or PHP or IOP, where people are like, in medical jeopardy, on top of like the mental desperate part. And, we had this really good talk. Seems like it makes sense. She wants to come in, ask her when, got this important meeting Thursday. Today is a Tuesday. And I just said, listen, I hear you. And I know how hard it is to make these phone calls. And I didn't have the courage to do it myself. My mother had to do it for me at 41 years old. But what you're doing right now is you're asking for help, which is really hard. But the most important thing is to receive and accept the help. And in my experience, when people ask for help, and then they wait to receive the help, it typically doesn't go very well. Yeah. Some people take that as like a threat, and the truth is it kind of is, because it's true.
Yeah.
It's a little dose of tough love, which I think is always the highest form of love, right? Like for me to, like, I never understand, if I see somebody who's making poor decisions and is literally killing themselves by making those decisions, for me to pat that person on the back and kind of cheer from the sidelines and just be like co-signing and, keep doing what you're doing. Am I not just signing that person's death? Like that is not love. Like that is the antithesis of love. For me to pull that person aside and be like, yo, what you're doing right now is killing you. That meeting that you have on Thursday, that can wait, because this thing like will kill you. I had an experience. I bring a meeting to the Alexandria Detention Center, which is a local jail that we have here in Alexandria, Virginia. And on Monday nights, I bring a meeting there with a couple guys, and we have like a varying attendance because the jail, people sign up, but then they might not get picked. And this one gentleman, I've gotten to know him over the last several weeks, and he's about 46 years old. And he's a drinker like me. So he would drink, he'd go to the bar, he would do his thing. And what he did on one specific night of doing the same exact thing that this guy does every night, like goes out, drinks, he got behind the wheel of a car. And what he did was he hit somebody because he was drunk. And that person was a 19-year-old kid. They died 3 days later. And so that gentleman, now 46 years old, his wife and 2 kids, 6 months and 5 years old, are out. He's in there, and he's waiting to understand if it's going to be aggravated manslaughter or unintentional. And the difference is 10 years or 20 years. And he's there, and like his wife and 2 kids are out there. She's struggling to work and make payments on bills and watch the kids as well. And he's not a bad guy. Like he's not a killer. Like he didn't like go out that night and say like, he was an alcoholic.
Right.
He was an alcoholic who had tried stopping to drink several times over the course of his life and just wasn't willing to ask for that help. So I always bring it back to that. This commitment's been so eye-opening for me. I'm big on service, and it's really given me a perspective on how lucky we really are when we get that window, that opportunity to ask for help. Because I was, I mean, we didn't get into a lot of my background, but like I was facing 15 felonies, 7 years in prison, deportation back to Italy. Because, like I said, I got arrested at 14. So, for joyriding my parents' car. So, my entire naturalization process was put on hold at age 14. And when I got hit with some of those bigger offenses, they started talking about deportation back to Italy. So, when I go to this commitment on Monday nights and I see guys there who were doing the same stuff I did, but maybe, just it went in a different direction. Like, I really, again, going back to that window when somebody calls and reaches out and says they've got a big important meeting or appointment or family vacation or whatever it is, like I really bring it back to that where it's like, no, like you might actually not show up for that thing because my buddy at the jail, he didn't know that that was going to happen. Nobody knows that that's going to happen until it happens to you.
Yep.
You're exactly right, man.
Yeah, it's tough stuff, man. And it's like we said, going back to the idea of tough love, I think given those opportunities, because that's what that is. When the phone rings, it's an opportunity. And I think passivity is we're not doing anybody any favors, right? And being able to try and seize that opportunity to at least help them understand how serious it is, or how important it is for them to go ahead and move forward with taking that step. We can't force them to do it, but only speak for myself. I think in those moments, like I need to know when I get off that phone or dismiss myself from that conversation that I've given all the information and education that I can, so that they're armed to make that decision or to choose not to, right? But for me to not leave it on the table, so to speak, is not good for me.
Yeah,
totally. And for a lot of these people, what I've found is it's like the first time that they're actually talking to somebody who can relate to what they're going through. And that is such a special moment. I've heard it said that the opposite of addiction is connectivity. And I subscribe to that, meaning that when I'm alone, isolated, in my addiction, in my alcoholism, it's hard for me to imagine a world where there's other people who are actually either recovering from or have recovered from that same exact hopeless state of body and mind. And so a lot of these folks, like when you're on the receiving end of one of those phone calls, it's the first time that they start talking about their drinking or drugging in detail. And they can be on the receiving end, like, they can hear that somebody identifies with that. I mean, how incredible is that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just to be able to say, hey, I'm not exactly sure what you're going through, but I've been there. I was on a call just like this, 7+ years or whatever it is. And, talking about the isolation and, and our disease wants us alone, and addiction is the opposite of connection or connectivity. I completely agree with that too. And something that I learned in recovery, which, probably one of a list a mile long of things I learned before, but never registered was, what you're talking about there, being alone, that's selfish, and that made no sense to me at first. How could that be selfish? I thought selfish just meant I didn't want to share my money or my booze or drugs or whatever with somebody, my cigarettes. That's selfish. But no, selfish is anytime I'm sitting there thinking about myself, and that's ego too. It's the flip of the ego. When I'm just sitting there thinking about myself, that I'm being selfish. And that was very eye-opening to me, but you're so right that so often these calls are people who have never been able to say anything. They've been terrified and just kept it all bottled up. And then just that one little, it's that sort of just grain of acceptance and humility and just admitting that something is not quite right. Because a lot of times these people are clients that's not their idea to make this phone call. And that's all right, because there's this myth that for somebody to get better, they have to be on their knees, totally desperate, and look at talk about the window, this perfect window where it's got to be I need help. I want help. I'll do anything. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it for themselves. And that, that does happen sometimes, but sometimes people just need to make that call, whether they wanted to or not, and then come do the deal and fake it till they make it long enough to get some results and then go from there.
Just take a step. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I'm sure you see this as well, Luke, but we see that all the time, right? Especially being in that, that very initial stage, right? Doing, detox stabilization and trying to help that person and that family decide what's going to happen next. I mean, we deal with that all the time. It's like, we're not asking you to commit to the next year or even 3 months. Like, let's just talk about what we're doing literally like next week. You know what I mean? Let's just figure that out. Let's keep moving the feet in the right direction. And let's keep, hoping that the miracle is going to happen for you. But let us, as the professionals, at least put you in a place to where, as long as you remain willing, good things are bound to happen, right? Or the possibility of those good things are greater, I guess.
Yeah, that I want to go with you to that H&I prison meeting. Where is it?
Yeah, Alexandria Detention Center.
And where is that in Alexandria?
You've probably driven by it like 100 times. It's right behind this like condo development. As you get on the highway, there's like a small little sign as you're about to get on the highway. And if you go straight, you get on the highway. If you follow the sign on the right that says Alexandria Detention Center, you find yourself at this massive, gated jail that houses, I think like 250 or 300 inmates. It's a really fantastic jail. I've been to a lot of jails, and as far as jails go, it's a pretty nice jail. And they do like an orientation, I think quarterly for new members who want to come in and volunteer. And on Monday nights, we bring a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous to the inmates who are picked and who come and show up. And a lot of these guys are, they're awaiting sentencing. So they are spending their time at the Alexandria Detention Center, waiting to see a judge. And then that judge will generally mandate that they be shipped somewhere else to a prison to serve out their sentence. But yeah, you should. I'll get you plugged in.
Love to. Okay, thank you. Well, hey, this is a good place to wind it down. What just Luke, please tell our listeners how they can find you personally, and Novara.
Sure. So our website would be a good starting point. It's just Novara Recovery Center.com. Novara spelled Novara. It's a Latin play on words that translates to new beginnings. And another good place would probably be on LinkedIn. Same thing, Novara Recovery Center. My LinkedIn is just my name, Luke DeGrossi. That's a good place. And then there's obviously contact information on the website. I think my cell phone's on there, my email. But always happy to connect with people.
Awesome. Great. Well, Justin definitely had that question about Novara.
Yeah.
So thank you for answering.
Yeah, that's great. That's good stuff.
I was wondering too. Well, Luke, y'all are doing great work. I can say firsthand, I've been there and I've gotten to know these guys. They're great guys doing it for the right reasons. And it's a beautiful, beautiful treatment center. And I know they're doing great work. So Luke, thank you so much for being here. Justin, thank you for being here as always.
Absolutely. Thank you, Luke. It's great to hang out with you, man.
Guys. Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Talk to you soon. If you liked what you heard today or just want to know more, give us a call on 919-670-8119 or visit us at newwatersrecovery.com. Thank you.